What if one of the brightest, most ambitious gods in the Anunnaki assembly willingly chose to step away from her home of eternal light in the stars to embark on a distant journey into a hidden realm of dust and darkness, a realm guarded by 7 magical gates, feared by mortals and immortals alike? Here lies a Sumerian legend that challenges our basic understanding of life, death, and the very hierarchy of the Divine Council. Because in the earliest dawn of the written language, the oldest clay tablets whisper of a breathtaking voyage taken by the Queen of Heaven herself into the deepest layers of the earth. This was no mistake or error in judgment, but a deliberate decision to cross into a typically forbidden domain, where even the most supreme gods could be stripped of their power. Tonight, we trace her incredible path to explore a mystery that has lingered in the earth for thousands of years, a story that turns the night sky into a gateway to a forgotten world. Imagine the sand-swept remnants of a world lost to time. Beneath the heavy silt of the Mesopotamian Empire, thousands of clay artifacts wake to whisper their secrets of an era when the divine and mortal realms were intimately entwined. Deep within sacred sanctuaries like those at Nippur, cuneiform tablets reveal the earliest known concepts of the underworld, a sunken kingdom the first scribes knew as Kur or Erkalla. But to them, this dark realm was not a place of fiery punishment, like we now associate with later biblical interpretations of the afterlife. Instead, it functioned as a vital baseline for the inner workings of the universe itself, a necessary balancing mechanism to complement the vibrant movement of the world above. In their eyes, Kur was the very foundation of all cosmic law, serving as the boundary between mankind and the primordial oceans, from which all things were first given shape. What if one of the brightest, most ambitious gods in the Anunnaki assembly willingly chose to step away from? The Sumerians viewed it as a dusty sanctuary, where all souls, be they gods or kings, priests, heroes, and even criminals alike, all find their eternal rest within its quiet embrace. One way or another, no matter the life they lead, they eventually all return to share the same ultimate fate, an eternal existence in an inescapable domain void of all light, existing quietly just beneath the upper realms of our tangible reality. Such a system required its own unwavering order, a structure which, in many ways, seems so stark in contrast to the luminous realms of the heavenly assembly we have come to know. It had an intricate system of rulers, arcane gates and gatekeepers, and inflexible laws that demanded absolute submission from anyone who crossed its threshold. Silent attendants walked through dim corridors to ensure every new arrival was properly recorded. No divine being or mortal hero could ever find a way around its strict parameters. It is here, in the silent depths of this shadowy underground kingdom, that we uncover one of the most intriguing stories known to Mesopotamian lore, Inanna's descent into the netherworld. A deep weight rests within these texts, and it cannot be understated, because this is no mere myth of family rivalry or ancient folklore. It is a profound exploration of universal duality, representing the remnants of a lost culture whose beliefs intertwined the intense radiance of spiritual power with the heavy stillness of cosmic balance. When we listen to the lost wisdom of these ancient verses, we aren't just reading a forgotten chronicle. We are witnessing an extraordinary spiritual transition during one of the earliest chapters in our collective history, when gods still roamed the earth. A moment where the boundaries of the cosmos itself are tested by a magnificent force of celestial ambition. Our tale brings us face to face with the 7 gates of the underworld, where dark trials await anyone who dares to walk the path to the great below. The enigmatic laws of this hidden empire bow to no god, and every gate demands a heavy price, one which forces us to wonder about the hidden forces that govern our reality. What remains when everything we use to define ourselves, to establish any sense of order over the world we know, is suddenly taken away? And why would such a radiant goddess, one whose revered domain was firmly tethered to the highest heavens, intentionally cross the one dark threshold from which no traveler is ever allowed to return? What could possibly be worth surrendering her seat in the heavens, leaving behind her sprawling temples and sunlit courtyards, to confront the one power in the universe that refuses to bow to her command? But before taking those first fateful steps downward, we must first peer into the beautifully structured world she left behind. Dim oil lamps flicker softly along winding canals, casting long shadows that dance vividly against earth and clay walls as the daily bustle of civilization fades into stillness. The thick scent of blooming night flowers mingles with the grounding aroma of damp river silt, and all the while, hidden doors lie waiting within thick walls of those towering stepped ziggurats, where we find ourselves standing amidst the quiet mud-brick temples of Uruk, resting peacefully under a timeless canopy of stars. A soothing ambient temperature wraps this sleeping metropolis in an eternally protective embrace. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. It is quietly comforting to realize that countless listeners, scattered across distant lands and different time zones, are all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this Sumerian history for sleep narrative, finding it helps you relax or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now we return to those weary occupants resting securely, completely unaware of the looming cosmic shift. A gentle breeze rustles through quiet palm orchards along those peaceful mud-brick walls of Uruk, while slow-moving stars turn patiently above their dreaming heads. Meanwhile, one of the brightest beacons among them is about to begin its long descent below the horizon, fading gracefully into the last glimmer of light, where the timeless secrets of the soul lie waiting in the darkness. High above this sleeping city shines the radiant star of both the morning and of the evening, the star Venus. This brilliant celestial ember was the living embodiment of the high goddess known as Inanna, or Ishtar to later generations. She was the goddess of love and war, of justice and power. The duality of her very nature was perfectly reflected in her sparkling form in the sky, which seemed to follow its own distinct path, disappearing for some periods and reappearing at others. She was the undisputed queen of heaven, a magnificent force of nature whose very essence pulsed with vibrant motion. This ambitious immortal constantly expanded her borders across the sunlit world, representing the bright and bustling life of early civilization. Her divine presence nurtured the blooming agricultural fields, bringing a strong energy to her beloved city. And in the evenings, her bright light spilled over the sprawling temple complex that had been dedicated to her name, known as Inanna. But even the most brilliant light casts a long shadow, drawing curious minds toward an uncharted darkness. Ancient clay tablets tell of a fateful moment when the goddess of the light turned her gaze away from those familiar stars, setting her heart upon the shadowy depths of the great below. A profound silence fell over the sacred courtyards of Uruk as she prepared to leave her comforting sanctuaries behind. Her motives for undertaking such a perilous descent remain beautifully shrouded in the mists of antiquity, where it is revealed that she sought to extend her vast terrestrial authority down into those quiet, dusty halls of the underworld. This was no accidental wandering into forbidden territory. She chose this hidden road with dedicated certainty, fully aware of the heavy laws and inherent dangers governing that lightless empire. To cross such a boundary required immense provisions, demanding that she arm herself with the highest symbols of her authority. So before taking her first steps toward the shadows, she gathered the most potent objects of her power. These sacred tokens were physical manifestations of the Holy May itself, the divine wisdom woven into every single thread of existence. As such, every piece of her royal attire functioned as a protective talisman, connected deeply to the magic of creation. She began her ceremonial preparations by placing the magnificent crown of heaven upon her head. This towering headdress radiated a fierce and unquestionable sovereignty over the sprawling green plains of Mesopotamia. Its heavy weight served as a constant reminder of her exalted status among even the highest-ranking deities of the sky. Next, she draped a stunning lapis lazuli necklace across her collarbone, its deep blue stones perfectly mirroring the celestial vault. Those precious gems held a shimmering, starlight quality that enhanced her breathtaking beauty. Soft reflections from the flickering temple lamps danced across the polished stones, projecting an aura of pure grace. Meanwhile, two delicate, egg-shaped beads were then fastened carefully to the adornments upon her chest. These specific treasures symbolized her nurturing vitality, representing the driving force of life that she brought to the earthly garden. And to shield her heart from unseen dangers, she secured a gleaming golden breastplate around her torso. Its smooth metallic surface provided a divine barrier, offering comfort against the creeping chill of the dark earth. It pulsed with a warm, organic rhythm that contrasted sharply with the cold stillness of her intended destination. This protective armor signified her absolute readiness to face whatever trials waited patiently in the depths below. Slipping a heavy gold ring onto her finger, she anchored her revered identity as a supreme ruler of the living. She then took up her lapis lazuli measuring rod, holding its accompanying line firmly in her grasp. These specific tools established the rigid borders of human civilization, representing her absolute command over an organized administration of our terrestrial planes. Finally, she wrapped herself in a majestic royal robe, completing her breathtaking transformation into a fully armored goddess. Every single object she wore was a carefully chosen symbol, written flawlessly in the language of upper-world powers. She stood as a dazzling beacon of earthly vitality, radiating her profound light against the gathering dusk. Yet despite her careful planning, the wise goddess understood the unprecedented risks of entering a realm that bowed to no one. The great below was an inescapable domain, functioning on rules that even the most powerful deities could not simply overwrite. She knew she must leave a tether to the surface, a clever contingency plan to ensure her safe return. Within the quiet shadows of her temple, she summoned her most loyal vizier, a dedicated servant known as Ninshubur. This faithful companion had stood by her side through countless ages, offering unwavering support and absolute devotion. Inanna spoke softly, entrusting her closest ally with a set of highly specific instructions if events took a turn for the worst. She ordered her vizier to wait patiently for 3 days, watching the horizon for any sign of her ascent. If the appointed time passed with no return, Ninshubur was to immediately sound an alarm across the celestial courts. The loyal servant must dress in torn garments of mourning, beating the drums of grief outside the sacred assembly halls. With her contingency plan securely in place, The radiant goddess turned her back on the comforting glow of her home. She walked slowly away from the bustling canals of Uruk, stepping out into the vast, empty expanse of the open desert. The familiar sounds of civilization faded entirely, replaced by a strange sort of silence that echoed across the barren plains. Every graceful stride carried her further away from the predictable rhythms of agricultural life on the sunlit surface. A cool wind swept down from the northern mountains, stirring the loose sand into drifting ghostly shapes along her path. She marched deliberately toward the hidden threshold of reality, a shadowy palace marking the entrance to the underworld. As her silent footsteps drew her further away from the comforting warmth of her rightful domain, the heat of the desert slowly gave way to a cruel shadow, where Inanna soon found herself standing before the imposing mud-brick walls of a place known as Ganzir, the ultimate threshold between our waking earth and the primordial abyss. This grand palace marked the absolute edge of mortal awareness, a towering structure completely insulated from the constant motion of living beings. Its heavy stone corridors swallowed the last lingering rays of twilight, wrapping her descending form in a thick blanket of darkness. Here, the ambient air grew perfectly still, carrying a faint scent of dry dust, mingling with the mineral-rich fragrance of buried clay. She walked deliberately toward a set of massive sealed wooden doors, sensing the immense crushing weight of the earth resting peacefully above her. Waiting patiently within this lightless entryway stood a chief gatekeeper of the lower realms, a solemn figure known to ancient scribes as Neti. History has often painted such guardians as terrifying monsters, yet early clay tablets describe a dignified administrator, tasked strictly with maintaining a flawless universal balance. His imposing silhouette projected an uncompromising reverence for the same ancient laws he was sworn to uphold, standing firmly as an unbreakable pillar of cosmic order. The heavenly goddess spoke softly into that cavernous silence, demanding immediate passage into his hidden empire of dust and lost souls. She announced her royal titles with a resounding confidence, expecting those heavy wooden doors to swing wide open at the mere mention of her celestial authority. Yet Neti listened to her commanding voice with patience, refusing to be swayed by such a dazzling display of upper-world sovereignty. This dignified keeper of boundaries understood that those shadowed halls would submit to absolutely no one, regardless of their magnificent status in high heavens above. He respectfully halted her progress, explaining that he must first consult with the supreme ruler of this dark domain before any traveler could enter. The loyal gatekeeper turned his back, the threshold still sealed behind him, disappearing into the deepest reaches of the underground palace to deliver the queen's unexpected request. Deep within the beating heart of this lightless domain rested a silent throne room belonging to Ereshkigal, the solemn judge of all departed souls. She served as a necessary cosmic opposite to her radiant sister, Inanna, embodying the very essence of stillness that eventually claims all earthly vitality. Early Mesopotamian traditions never described her as being inherently wicked, as one might expect, but rather as a profoundly burdened caretaker, tasked primarily with managing the eternal rest of countless souls and maintaining the silent order of all creation. While her vibrant counterpart nurtured the blooming agricultural fields on the surface, the queen of the underworld tended to the afterlife of all mortal souls below. Ereshkigal listened carefully as her chief gatekeeper announced the arrival of her ambitious sibling, feeling a deep, unsettling tension ripple throughout her quiet halls at the news. Bringing such a blinding, restless energy into a sanctuary of endings could dangerously threaten the fragile equilibrium governing her silent domain. The underworld queen pondered this unprecedented intrusion, weighing the heavy consequences of allowing her sister to breach the strict boundaries between them. She eventually granted permission for those heavy doors to be opened, but this rare rite of passage came with a highly strict and entirely non-negotiable condition. A condition that would force the Goddess of Light to undertake an incredibly dark voyage to reach the dusky throne rooms waiting just below. Her radiant sister would only be allowed to enter if she submitted entirely to ancient, undeniable laws governing 7 descending gates. Neti returned to his post, carrying the solemn decree of his powerful mistress back to the celestial goddess waiting by its entrance. Slowly, he unfastened the heavy wooden bolts securing that first massive door, revealing a descending lightless corridor stretching endlessly into the depths of the earth. A cool, stagnant breeze swept upward from the open threshold. Glowing softly in her divine armor, the goddess of the morning star stepped eagerly toward the first boundary, initiating her ritualistic progression. But just as she was about to cross this initial threshold, the chief gatekeeper reached out with a gentle yet firm determination. He respectfully demanded that she surrender her most prominent symbol of authority, asking her to remove the exalted crown from her head. This magnificent headdress had represented her unquestionable sovereignty over the sprawling green valleys of our terrestrial Earth for what seemed like forever. Handing it over meant willingly shedding her recognized status as an untouchable supreme ruler among the highest ranks of immortal deities. Nonetheless, the Kur bows to no one, and so the heavy golden symbol was taken slowly from her brow, dimming her brilliant aura just a fraction as it disappeared into the gathering shadows. Stripped of her grandest ornament, a sudden wave of concern washed over the once untouchable queen. She looked toward the guardian of the gates with a profound sense of confusion, asking why her sacred talisman of power was being confiscated. Her voice carried a faint tremor of uncertainty, echoing softly against the smooth stone walls of the corridor. Neti did not provide an explanation out of ill intent. He simply spoke in a hypnotic mantra, one simple passage that served as the foundational bedrock for the entire underworld kingdom. His voice came in a soft but firm whisper. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. These chillingly calm words established an undeniable truth, one that no amount of divine magic could ever overwrite without shattering all of reality itself. The lightless domain below did not recognize any earthly symbols of power, and it cared little for the shining accomplishments achieved in the warm sunlight above. And little did she yet know that this was just the first step to come. Without her towering symbol of authority, Inanna appeared noticeably smaller against the overwhelming scale of this deep rocky architecture. She took a slow, steadying breath, preparing her spirit for the long descent awaiting her in the lightless caverns ahead. That heavy wooden door of the first threshold slammed shut behind her, echoing with a terrifying finality that urged her onward. With a single silent tick, it had locked away any lingering trace of the bright world above. She found herself standing alone within a narrow descending corridor, carved entirely from smooth cold stone. Stagnant air drifted slowly upward from the hidden depths, wrapping around her fading silhouette like a chilling embrace. Every deliberate footstep echoed softly against bare rock, producing a steady rhythm as she journeyed deeper. The radiant glow normally surrounding her celestial form began to struggle against the crushing weight of these subterranean shadows. The isolated path upon which she walked demanded the absolute submission of her strong spirit. Soon, this winding passage opened into another vast open chamber, where she found the second towering gate of the great below. Its massive cedar timbers formed a formidable threshold bound tightly together by thick bands of tarnished copper that had long since surrendered their earthly shine to an eternal coating of dust. Its imposing frame was secured by heavy locking bars carved into the shapes of fearsome lions, the silent guardians of a lonely crossroad. This ancient wood absorbed all remaining traces of warmth from its surroundings, standing as a monolithic barrier between the wandering queen and the deeper shadows waiting patiently just beyond its reach. Here, the dignified gatekeeper waited patiently before its sealed entrance, ready to enforce the ancient laws and strict parameters of this dusty domain. Glowing softly in the gathering gloom, Queen Inanna approached this next uncompromising barrier with a hesitance. Nettie reached forward once again, this time to demand the surrender of her shimmering lapis lazuli necklace. This breathtaking adornment had long rested across her collarbone to symbolize her unbreakable connection with the boundless starry heavens. Those deep blue stones held the very essence of the vibrant night sky, projecting an aura of pure celestial beauty across the world. Handing over such a precious artifact physically severed her ties to the upper atmosphere. Those polished gems vanished into complete darkness, instantly dimming the radiant light that had always accompanied her presence. Once again, the goddess felt a profound wave of vulnerability wash over her shivering form. And once again she questioned Nettie about this rite of passage, seeking to better understand the harsh rituals of his quiet realm. But the faithful gatekeeper simply repeated his hypnotic warning, saying nothing less and nothing more. The second gate opened slowly before her. Dark corridors plunged even further into a realm that grew increasingly devoid of color or warmth. But there was no turning back. The once vibrant deity had no choice but to continue through this suffocating atmosphere, where the energy of life held absolutely no sway. The sheer weight of the silence pressed tightly against her ears as she eventually arrived before the next imposing threshold. This tremendous wooden door stood as another rigid checkpoint in her relentless descent toward the throne room of Ereshkigal. At the third gate, the steadfast guardian instructed his royal guest to remove the twin egg-shaped beads from the adornments resting upon her chest. These delicate treasures represented her nurturing fertility, a physical manifestation of her divine life force. In the sunlit world above, those beautiful beads pulsed with a warm and organic rhythm that encouraged the blooming of agricultural fields. But such a fierce earthly energy had absolutely no place nor purpose within the barren dust of the underworld. Bereft of her nurturing symbols, the Queen of Heaven stood as a shadow of her former glory before the third gate, which now swung open on quiet hinges, inviting her to continue her daring adventure away from everything she had ever known. Every cautious step carried her bravely onward through dark, winding passages, her spirit humbled by the crushing architecture of deep earth. The ambient temperatures plummeted drastically as she approached the fourth imposing threshold. Nettie stood there yet again, firmly blocking her path, raising his hands to request the removal of her golden breastplate. This gleaming metallic armor had provided a divine barrier against the creeping dangers of the unknown. Its polished surface was a glorious royal display of her absolute readiness to face any trial or conflict. With its surrender, she relinquished the last remaining layer of her physical defense. The protective golden plate dissolved into the shadows, leaving her exposed to the eternal chill of those cool stone walls. And as the cold set in, those heavy wooden doors parted to reveal a corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into our planet's deepest roots. With every passing moment within the deepening gloom, the fond memories of her sunlit temples began to feel like a distant dream. those heavy earthen walls pressed inward, reminding our descending queen of her total isolation from the bustling cities she once nurtured. The slow, repetitive dripping of subterranean water was the only measure left to mark the slow passage of time in a world that otherwise remained completely frozen. Mortal minds are invited to ponder the breathtaking metaphor hidden within this slow shedding of immortal pride. We see an ambitious deity forced to expose the raw essence of her spirit. It is a mesmerizing countdown to a complete loss of worldly identity, proving that even the most powerful creators must eventually submit to the greater workings of the universe. Our resilient ancestors recorded this journey not as a tragic defeat, but as a profound and vital exploration of cosmic balance. They recognized that the heavy laws of this hidden empire were designed to maintain an unbroken harmony throughout all of reality. Every confiscated artifact represented a necessary sacrifice to preserve that fragile equilibrium governing living populations alongside the departed souls of their ancestors. As that fourth door closed with a deafening thud, the surrounding darkness grew thick enough to feel tangible against her bare skin, but her fateful descent was still only half complete. She would need to be prepared for a much deeper unraveling of her celestial power in the shadows waiting patiently below, where her solitary footsteps carried her bravely toward an even greater surrender of all civilized order, as she knew it. Deep within this sunken labyrinth rested a silence heavier than any stone. Dense earthen walls pressed closely around her fading form. A stagnant chill lingered like a living presence in its ancient halls, where thick layers of dust coated every smooth surface along her path. Soon a fifth imposing barrier emerged from the gloom. Its enormous beams stood firmly across the narrow passage, and as always, Nettie waited patiently beside its sealed entrance. He raised his hand, demanding yet another piece of her worldly identity. The goddess was instructed to remove the precious gold ring from her finger, the ultimate seal of her social authority. It represented every binding oath she had sworn among the living. To wear this golden band meant holding a recognized name across the sweeping Mesopotamian plains. Nonetheless, the price must be paid. She slipped it slowly from her hand, watching cautiously as the gleaming metal was quickly swallowed by the swirling dust and inky shadows of the underworld. Taking away this jewelry stripped her entirely of her recognized terrestrial office. Without her royal seal, the radiant queen became just another nameless wanderer, navigating an endless night. The heavy wooden door slowly creaked open, and the once powerful Queen of Heaven ventured further onward into the void, the weight of its stillness wrapped tightly around her shivering shoulders. The familiar sounds of bustling markets had long since faded from memory. She was becoming a silent participant in an ancient cosmic ritual, one which went back to the very beginning of all things. Every gentle stride pulled her deeper into an uncompromising domain within the very bedrock of the world. It was a mesmerizing progression toward complete vulnerability. Another grand open chamber eventually appeared in the murky distance of these narrowing corridors. Here, the sixth towering gate required an absolute surrender of her most vital administrative tools. Nettie respectfully demanded the lapis lazuli measuring rod and its accompanying line. These specific items were profound symbols of early civilization itself. Earthly rulers had utilized such tools to establish rigid borders. They were essential for designing towering mud brick temples or digging sweeping canals. Giving them up meant relinquishing her command over the mechanics of architecture and engineering. The mortal world was built entirely upon carefully calculated measurements that they relied heavily upon to cultivate the wild plains. But an ambitious desire to organize reality holds absolutely no power within the great below. This silent kingdom cannot be surveyed by instruments belonging to the living. Ancient boundaries established by a lapis lazuli rod would dissolve instantly within this lightless void. Its endless dusty expanse defies all attempts to map its quiet corridors. Our beautiful goddess solemnly surrendered her sacred blue rod to the shadows, placing it, along with her coiled line, gently into the waiting hands of the gatekeeper. It was a breathless moment representing the total collapse of her civilized order. Those polished administrative tools vanished quickly into the surrounding gloom, and with them she watched a vital piece of the holy May slip away from her grasp. Her deep connection to the very structure of her beloved Uruk had been removed. Deprived of these administrative artifacts, her capacity to govern an organized metropolis evaporated entirely. But it was far too late to turn back. Pushing on, she walked bravely past the massive wooden frame of the sixth threshold. A profound realization begins to echo through the silence during the final hours of her lonely trek. An ancient understanding that traces back to the very dawn of history, long before the gods themselves first walked our rolling plains. Those heavenly decrees of the holy May were being methodically stripped away, but this was never intended as a petty punishment or insult. To enter the realm of permanent silence, every remnant of the heavens must be entirely erased. Each piece of sacred attire left behind represented a shedding of cosmic identity, where the radiant power of the upper world is systematically undone, leaving only the foundational energy of one's existence. Not an ego propped up by glorious conquests and shiny material possessions, but the very essential fabric of their spirit, their true nature. It was a necessary cosmic translation, required by a system that embodied both the beginning and end of all things. The great below possesses no use for the symbolic authority of the stars, or the politicized glory of kings. It matters not what royal seal you once carried, for this dusty sanctuary cares little for what great city once sang your name. Every single soul, mortal and immortal alike, must arrive bare before their final judgment. Worldly titles mean nothing to a kingdom built upon eternal rest. And even the strongest walls and borders dissolve into the ether when faced with the infinite scale of the abyss. Such an immense loss of identity humbles even the most prideful deities of the Anunnaki Pantheon, and this story reflects that better than most. In Inanna's journey, we witness a vibrant goddess forced to abandon all connection to her sunlit realm, shedding every layer of her celestial power, leaving only the raw essence beneath. And interestingly enough, here we find a small piece of the wisdom contained in these forgotten mythologies. Because her fading splendor was even more than just a necessary toll to transcend into the realm of the dead, it also mirrors the temporary nature of all earthly creation. Even the grandest walls of a sprawling metropolis and the loudest bustling markets contained within must eventually crumble back into raw river clay from which they were formed. The silent foundations of primordial law waits patiently to reclaim every spark of vital energy in its due time. High on the surface, mortal caretakers continue their daily labor, completely unaware of this profound trial. They stack heavy bricks to build massive temples dedicated to the supreme authority of their divine rulers. And all the while, deep below them, that same celestial sovereignty quietly bows her head to the absolute power of the netherworld, a domain that treats all wandering travelers with equal indifference. The radiant queen moved steadily through the gloom while trying to comprehend the underlying truths of this difficult lesson. Step by graceful step, she floated like a tiny ember through a vast network of subterranean caverns. The faint fluctuation of cool air brushed gently against her bare arms with every careful stride. Those winding pathways grew increasingly narrow as she neared the central heart of Ker. The crushing weight of our entire world settled firmly upon her shoulders. Every shadow seemed to stretch lazily across the bare rock, pulling her further downward. She surrendered her tired muscles to the heavy draw of its gravity, as her spirit was slowly recalibrated to match the subtle frequencies of the deep. Only one final piece of her worldly power remained intact, the majestic royal robe of ladyship, which clung softly to her skin. It was the last lingering tether connecting her to the vibrant empires of the living. She gathered her remaining courage to face the ultimate trial waiting ahead of her. The last and final murky threshold loomed quietly in the distance. Here, the heavy doors of the seventh gate guarded the silent throne room of the Underworld Queen. Nettie stood perfectly still before the massive cedar timbers of this ultimate entryway to the deeply buried domain of the Netherworld. The gatekeeper raised his hand one more time to demand her very last earthly tether, the majestic royal robe of ladyship known as a pala garment. Such breathtaking fabric had served as the grand symbol of her celestial identity and status. Its finely woven threads carried the familiar scent of blooming orchards from the gardens of the upper sanctuaries. Submitting to his demand meant completely relinquishing her final protective layer of worldly comfort. But the price of her entrance would demand nothing less, and so she allowed this heavy velvet cloth to slip gracefully from her weary shoulders, leaving her completely stripped of any worldly tether or celestial symbol of power. 7 times she had stood before those towering gates, slowly giving up every lingering connection to the realm she knew, and all 7 times she would question the reasoning behind it. Now, standing bare before the final entrance to a place of no return, Inanna posed that question once more, and one last time the gatekeeper replied with the same calm and undeniable answer. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. His steady voice came in a hushed whisper, and perhaps, this time, it was more than just the repetition of a ritualistic mantra. It was a warning. One last, final omen of what was to come, if the ways of their domain were not abided by. Heavy wooden doors groaned open to reveal an awe-inspiring sanctuary buried within the ancient bedrock. She stepped bravely across this absolute boundary into a domain of profound silence. That final massive doorway slammed shut behind her, echoing with a terrifying finality. Narrow earthen corridors suddenly gave way to a breathtaking display of dark, shimmering stone. Ancient clay texts described this hidden palace as a massive structure carved entirely from pure lapis lazuli. Polished blue walls caught the faint, ethereal light to create a barely perceptible contrast against the heavy dust. Here, the cool air carried no trace of the fresh scent of damp river silt. It smelled of age, and not just the kind of muskiness that permeates old cellars. It was the kind of scent that spoke of the most primordial days of the earth, long before the very first breath of life was ushered into the light. It smelled of ancient crushed minerals and decaying matter that had long since dissolved into the very dust that permeated the rest of the realm, where it lay trapped forever in a timeless vault far below the surface of the earth. Its massive architecture absorbed every faint sound, amplifying her profound isolation. Stepping into her sister's palace felt like walking across a frozen midnight sky. Dark blue stone surfaces projected a haunting celestial beauty that rivaled her own. It was a sprawling monument dedicated to eternal rest. At the far end of this vast chamber, Ereshkigal sat solemnly upon her ancient throne. She projected an imposing majesty that perfectly mirrored the crushing stillness of her lightless empire. This quiet ruler of departed souls watched her vulnerable sister approach with unwavering focus. The contrast between these two cosmic forces became strikingly apparent in that dim room. Our once radiant Queen of Heaven now stood entirely divested of her earthly splendor, facing her dark counterpart, who embodied an inescapable destination for all living things. But despite shedding every layer of her divine armor, a restless ambition still flickered within Inanna's spirit. Her conquering nature could not easily surrender even to the formidable forces of the deep. She looked upon that lapis lazuli throne with a sudden, overwhelming desire. Taking a bold step forward, the radiant goddess would commit a fatal transgression against the cosmic balance. She intended to overthrow her sister, seeking to claim this dark dominion for herself. It was a fierce display of immortal ego that directly challenged the unbreakable foundation of reality itself. For as she had been warned many times, the underworld laws were designed to function exactly as intended. It was an undeniable truth, protecting their fragile equilibrium from such reckless intrusion. Ereshkigal rose from her seat with a sudden terrifying authority to defend her quiet realm. And so she would. Inanna's attempt would be quickly subdued. The gradual stripping of her celestial authority had left her far too vulnerable. While she lay defeated on the palace floor, the 7 Anunnaki judges of the netherworld materialized slowly from the surrounding shadows. They represented the strict laws of a justice that bows to no mortal or celestial sovereign. These dreaded arbiters of fate assembled silently around their bold intruder, decreeing a heavy cry of guilt that boomed across those polished blue walls. Together, they would deliver the ultimate penalty for her transgression. Not out of malice or cruel intent. They acted merely as a flawless force of balance, designed to neutralize any threat to the universal design. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they focused their collective power upon the fading Queen of Heaven. Those mysterious judges gathered closely together, where it is said that they cast the eyes of death upon her, and in that moment a crushing gaze of absolute stillness washed completely over her bare form. The power that had once fueled her was immediately extinguished under their dark scrutiny, all within the span of a single breathless moment. Solemn eyes watched as her life force surrendered completely to silence. In accordance with the strict, undeniable laws of the realm, her radiant energy was transformed into a motionless, sleeping form held suspended upon those ancient walls of the underworld kingdom. There she would remain in a deep slumber, held fast by the quiet currents of antiquity. The reigning goddess of vibrant cities had been conquered by the infinite scale of the abyss. This dark underground sanctuary reclaimed its peaceful order, swallowing her fading light without a single trace. Yet even in the dust and darkness we find a spark of hope. They may not have known it at the time, but her breathtaking journey into the world of shadows was actually far from over. Because although she had been taken by the deep, her clever contingency plan remained perfectly intact. One last fragile thread had been carefully tied to the world above, a plan that had been laid out before she had even taken her first step. Her loyal vizier, Ninshubur, still waited patiently under the starry skies above the mud-brick temples of Uruk, faithfully watching the flat eastern horizon for any sign of her beloved queen. Refreshing night breezes swept softly across those quiet canals, rustling through swaying palm orchards. The steady rhythm of mortal life continued its patient hum just above the hidden conflict, while Ninshubur kept a lonely vigil. When 3 days had passed with no return, she prepared to set this miracle into motion. She would soon travel to petition some of the most powerful gods of the Anunnaki Pantheon for aid. Gods who possessed enough esoteric magic to orchestrate such an unprecedented rescue from a place of no return. And in the meantime we may rest assured that this beloved goddess of love and light will always return to our moonlit horizons, just as she has for countless millennia before. Her luminous embodiment as the evening star of Venus has been thought to reflect her descent into the underworld for countless generations of curious mortal minds. Minds who gazed up into the night sky during the earliest dawn of human civilization, wondering why her bright light seems to follow such an irregular path. And no matter the phase of her cycle, she maintains a patient eternal vigil across the sparkling tapestry of the heavens. She will rise again from those quiet roots of creation as the morning star, to nurture the sprawling agricultural fields of the surface once more. But for now, a heavy and comforting stillness blankets her bright spirit within the protective sanctuary of the deep earth. This peaceful pause safely cradles the entire landscape, allowing the final echoes of her cosmic journey to dissolve softly into a beautiful tide of restful dreams. Slow-moving stars turn patiently above the majestic mud-brick temples of ancient Uruk, bringing faint light to the grand architecture of this sleeping metropolis. As the quiet hours of the night deepen, the silver light of the heavens brushes softly across the peaceful canals, wrapping every courtyard in a protective embrace of complete tranquility. This serene atmosphere invites every element of the natural world to surrender to the comforting quiet of the Mesopotamian night. Cradled forever by the compassionate magic of early creation, the ancient landscape rests in perfect alignment with the celestial order. The world breathes softly in absolute harmony. The vast expanse of 1,000 twinkling lights travels endlessly along the gentle celestial seas of the night sky. This brilliant display overhead serves as a timeless analogy for the continuous folds of deep history. Like those steady stars tracing their familiar paths across the heavens, the memories of the past move along a calm and predictable current. Humanity floats endlessly along the shifting currents of antiquity, guided safely by the enduring legacy of those who came before. Every soul remains suspended safely within the long shadows of the ancient world, resting securely under the watchful gaze of the cosmos, connecting the earliest ages of mankind to the world we now inhabit, maintaining a beautiful and unbroken chain of existence. We are all a part of this magnificent history, woven deeply into the very fabric of an everlasting story that spans countless generations. Our footsteps fall upon the very same soil which has cradled the towering monuments of countless golden empires, where the quiet rooms of the ancient library houses used to rest in total serenity. Delicate marks of cuneiform script hold their timeless wisdom in an environment of undisturbed peace. This profound stillness wraps the sacred sanctuaries in a comforting mantle of protection, preserving the timeless magic of a bygone era. The quiet progression of our collective memories remains entirely secure, offering a comforting reassurance that our origins are preserved within hardened artifacts, made from the earth itself. Our eyes are illuminated by the exact same light that once guided the ancient stargazers of early Sumeria. The identical constellations that once sparkled above the first courts of the primeval kings continue to trace their patient patterns across the midnight sky, reminding the mortal spirit of an enduring permanence and anchoring our consciousness to a sense of timeless wonder. The continual nature of deep history provides a profound sense of security that warms the quiet evening. There is a beautiful certainty in the knowledge that the rhythms of creation will always remain constant. Calm winds sweep across the wide plains, whispering the ancient secrets of the soul to those willing to listen. The fragrant perfume of desert flowers mingles perfectly with the grounding aroma of the rich river silt, soothing every wandering thought. The entire landscape surrenders to a state of suspended tranquility, floating effortlessly upon a slow tide of absolute peace. The roots of early creation reach deep into the rich soil to anchor the world in a restorative period of rest. This quiet sanctuary under the stars offers a comforting shelter, a place where the mind can fully surrender to the calm of night. Every slow breath aligns beautifully with the peaceful cadence of a landscape that is safely asleep within the distant memory of antiquity, enveloped completely by the everlasting harmony of our origins.